Frequent Miler on the Air starts now. Today's main event. It turns out that Delta miles are worth more than American Airlines or United.
What? Get out of here, Greg. It sounds to me like someone is reaching for a reason to justify spending for Delta Elite status. You got to be crazy.
Right. Now, we will, in the main event, we will explain that crazy thing I just said. We will also get into a debate. Should we change the way we're valuing points and miles? And this all came up this week big time because some numbers that we presented showed Delta ahead. And so that's obviously wrong. So we need to fix it, or at least we're going to argue that. First, of course, we've got the giant mailbag. And
Reach in there. What are the people saying this week?
Okay, here it is. Okay. Today's mail is from Apple Podcast Review. This is from Goob 6008.
Goob 6008. Nice to meet you.
I don't know if there's so many other Goobs out there that Goob just got assigned that number, or if there's something special.
First come, first served. If you want to be Goob, yeah.
But Goob says, best travel rewards podcast. I look forward to this podcast every week. I even pretend to do yard work to sneak off and listen to this. My wife doesn't share my enthusiasm for the subject, and my daughter is too noisy. Anyway, it's become a Saturday morning ritual. These guys are super detail-oriented and informative. Keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. I totally agree. It is the best travel rewards podcast, isn't it? I mean, it's the best one that I'm on anyway, right?
It's by far the best one you're on. That's right. And I love this, the part about him sneaking off to pretend to do yard work. That's, I find that hilarious. I
got to take a page out of that playbook, I think.
Right.
Or yard work in my future.
Like when I listen to podcasts, I sometimes do it while I'm doing chores. Like, doing the dishes in the kitchen or something. I put in the headphones and listen to a podcast. And so I could totally see why yard work would be the perfect excuse. It's long enough for our show, which tends to be an hour or longer. So that's a great, great way to do it. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe this is our 90th show.
Wow. 90.
Yeah, 90. So we do these weekly. So you know what that means? It means we're not that far from 2 full years of this.
2 years. That's a lot of yard work Goob's been doing.
That's a lot of yard work.
Goob's going to need a bigger lawn. That's what
his wife's probably wondering when there's 3 feet of snow outside what kind of yard work Goob is doing. But no, almost 2 years of putting up with you. I deserve a medal or something.
Yeah. I think. Touche. 2 years.
Anyway, shall we move on to?
We should. To what crazy thing did Greg do this week? He said Delta miles were worth more than. No. Okay, sorry, I got off track. We're coming back to that. What crazy thing did choice privileges do this week, Greg?
Yeah, well, you're the one who wrote about it, so you're going to have to tell us all about Choice's craziness. What did they do?
They've got a great promo out right now, or at least somebody in the marketing department thought it would be a great idea to get everybody to want to stay at Choice Hotels by offering 8,000 bonus points for weekend stays. Now, they did say weekend stays. It doesn't sound too bad, right? You got to stay a Friday and a Saturday night, except it's valid for 2 weekends. Like, they released a promotion and sent out an email for a promotion that's valid if you stay this weekend, Friday and Saturday, which by the time you're hearing this podcast, it's too late because you had to check in already. And next weekend. So 2 weekends only, the 2 weekends left in March. If you stay either of those weekends at a Choice Privileges property or both, you'll get 8,000 bonus points on top of the base points that you ordinarily earn. Now, I looked at that and I said to myself, what? Like, what? Does that make you want to run out and have like a Quality Inn, some Quality Inn getaway this weekend, Greg?
Well, when they put promotions that are like off in the future, that gives me enough time to realize that I really don't want to do it. So this one is like, gets you excited. And then it's like, I'm going to run out and do it. And then you don't have any time to realize, oh wait, this is a really bad idea.
It's like
so
already half. I mean, like who doesn't have plans for this weekend at this point? Like,
you have to register for this thing too.
You have to register. You have to register before you check out. So I guess you could, if you're in a Choice hotel right now and you stayed there Friday night and it's now Saturday, March, I don't know, whatever. Then register before you check out and stay until at least Sunday, because you got to stay both Friday and Saturday night for the next 2 weekends, one or the other. You don't have to do both weekends, of course. But
right.
So it was like,
so I remember a kind of funny little nugget from your post that there's some there's some unspecified number of hotels that are not included in this promotion, right?
Yeah, it's like this group isn't included and that group isn't included, among others. among others? Like, what do you mean among? Who are the others?
Right.
That would be kind of important to know, wouldn't it? If you're going to book a hotel in order to earn 8,000 points, you'd want to know who the others are that are not participating in this promotion. So, so you have no idea. You're rolling the dice. It's like, rolling the dice to see if you even are staying at a hotel that qualifies, because nobody's going to tell you. And goodness knows, if you call a Choice Privileges agent, they aren't going to know. So total roll of the dice. And I'm like, okay, I know people are getting back out and traveling somewhat. I get that. I know a lot of people aren't traveling yet. And I know that whether you are the type of person who is traveling right now or the type of person who is not, you probably already had your mind made up on that before Thursday of this week, right? Like, you probably, you were pretty firm in one camp or the other by Thursday. And you had a reservation already if you were going somewhere this weekend, I imagine. Maybe I'm wrong. Choice thinks I'm wrong.
You would think, but I don't know. Yeah, this is crazy. So let's say you decided to do it. Is it worth it? So you're getting what, 8,000 points,
right?
Plus whatever points you would earn for the stay normally, which is unusual for a Choice promo. Usually they just sort of fill up. They give you how many you normally earn and then add on the little bit to make it go up to the 8,000, right?
Right. Exactly. This is very atypical. I saw that. I actually had written that the 8,000 would be instead of earning points and not on top of. I just wrote that in the post without even reading the terms, because that's just the way Choice promos are. And then I said, let me take a quick look at the terms. And I was like, well, would you look at that? Choice throwing me a curveball here. Didn't expect it. 8,000 points on top. Is it worth it? No, of course it's not.
It's not worth
of course not. No, I mean,
even if you had a weekend stay that in total cost $80.
Right. That's the cheapest you can pay, because you have to pay at least $40 a night before tax. So you're not paying any less than 80, and it's going to be 80 plus tax.
And so let's say after tax, it comes to a little bit more. But the point is, like, even with the points you get normally plus these 8,000, you're at best, like the best you could do is basically buy points for a penny each, right?
Right.
And that would be a miracle if you got it exactly to that and it happened to qualify. And guess what? Simply by booking and canceling cash and point stays, you can buy points for less than that.
Right.
Right.
You can, and you should not do this promotion. I mean, if you're already staying at a Choice Privileges property, I mean, of course, register for it. Take your points.
Yeah.
I just don't understand. I mean, they didn't have to print anything, so I guess they didn't waste any money on promoting this. I guess. But I look at it, I'm like, it's not worth the paper it's written on, kind of a thing, and it's not even on paper. It's in an email form. Like,
and you have to stay the whole weekend at
both
one
days.
hotel?
Yeah, one hotel.
So it's not. See, I was going to say, like, I could totally see this for people who are road tripping, who are I don't care where I stay. I'll pick a Choice property instead. But I'm not going to stay 2 nights at a highway side hotel that just happens to be on my way, right?
Right. No, I mean, I guess Choice Privileges is banking on you doing exactly that. They think you're going to extend your stay on the side of the highway for an extra night so you can get your 8,000 points, Craig. I mean, hey, they're just trying to
the I-40 whatever hotel. Yeah. That would be
so
that would be nice.
I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it, Choice. I don't get it, but fun.
All right. So I kind of ventured. I realized as we were doing that, I kind of ventured into our next thing, or the Mattress running the numbers. I did that by accident.
You did, because that was not Mattress running the numbers. It was crazy thing.
It wasn't intended to be.
Because it was crazy.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense. Mattress running the numbers. I mean, we did just run the numbers there, and you shouldn't Mattress run that one back. But let's Mattress run something else. Well, I'm done with Choice. Like, I want to choose something different.
So Wyndham is out with a great promotion.
Perfect inflection there.
You can earn 1,000 to 7,500 points per stay. So let's talk about the 7,500 points per stay. That's for staying 3 nights. So you stay 1 night, you get 1,000. 2 nights, you get 3,000. 3 nights, 7,500. This is all together. So
they are really banking on you extending that highway side stay, aren't
they? They are. And the 3 nights is where you're getting the most points per night, right? 7,500 points all together.
2,500 points
so that's
a night.
2,500 a night.
Right.
Yeah. So do we even need to run any numbers here? I mean, let's generously call Wyndham points a penny each, just to make the math easy.
Yeah. Right.
We're talking about a $25 rebate per night. It's obviously nowhere near Mattress Run worthy. And I wouldn't normally value them that high. So yeah, 2 thumbs down, right?
Yeah, definitely. Nope, done with that one. Sorry, Wyndham. If you're staying at a Wyndham property, register.
Might as well get the points. Absolutely.
But, it's just the weird thing. Stephen Pepper pointed this out is like they've done a bunch of these promotions in the past where you only had to stay like 2 nights and you got 7,500 points, and now. Okay, maybe they're expecting travel to recover some, so maybe they don't feel like they have to push as hard to get people to stay, but I don't know if Wyndham's got it like that. Let's put it this way, to make you have to stay 3 nights instead of 2. I don't think that a worse promotion than their typical promotion is the smart play right now. Of course, Wyndham didn't ask me, but who am I?
Yeah, no, I don't get it. Meanwhile, Whaaaat is giving us 5,000 or no, I don't remember how many points, a lot more points than this. So
3 night every 10 nights. Yeah, I mean, come on, it's Wyndham. You're playing games here. Get serious.
Right.
Get your act together. All right.
And Whaaaat points are worth so much more. So do the Whaaaat promo if you're in the market to stay somewhere. Okay. Time for that main event. Let's talk about why Delta miles are worth more.
Stop it, Greg. Stop it.
Than United or American Airlines miles.
You're living in a dream world.
Frequent Miler, one of my favorite blogs, wrote that Delta miles are worth 1.2 cents each, and they wrote that American Airlines miles are worth only 1 cent each. What's going on?
That's not what Frequent Miler wrote. I'm sure that's what maybe you read, Greg, or somebody read. That's not exactly what Frequent Miler wrote. It's, okay, it's close to being sort of ish what Frequent Miler wrote. But the key here is that you wrote these posts because we're trying to figure out how to value airline miles, right? Because in the past, you had developed what I think was by far the best way to value points and miles. And that was with a reasonable redemption value. And, it's easy to get caught up in what that is and to sometimes make the mistake of thinking that the value of a mile is how much it's worth. And so this is how much cash it's worth. And that's not really what the goal of reasonable redemption values was in the beginning. The whole idea of the reasonable redemption values was to give you an idea of what you can reasonably expect to get as like a floor level. If you don't put too much effort in, you're not going to live and breathe this stuff and, look up awards all the time and try to, just hunt and pack for the best possible values. This is what you can expect to get, generally speaking. So that's where you kind of started with this, but we got off the rails.
We did. So we started using these values for a lot of things. And for example, when you look at our best category bonuses page, the page that shows you which card to use at grocery stores, which card to use at gas stations, all that kind of stuff. We have in our credit card displays, what the sort of percent rebate is for each type of spend. And we are using the reasonable redemption value to calculate that. But by doing that, we're saying that the RRV is the cash equivalent value for the points, meaning basically you're equally happy. So let's say the reasonable redemption value is for Ultimate Rewards is 1.5 cents per point. We're basically saying you're equally happy to have either 1.5 cents or 1 chase point. And that's kind of when you look at cash equivalents, that's what it means. It's not really about the redemption value. And but we got tied to that. We need that information, right? Like that's a key to a bunch of our posts, a lot of things we do with it. Trying to explain to people like we could have two separate numbers, but trying to explain to people in every situation why we have one number over here and a different number over there, it'll be way too confusing.
Nightmare for the average
Right.
person that's taking a look at it, that's not like thinking about this stuff all the time from 9 different angles. I mean, it just wouldn't make any sense.
Right. So the good is better than great, right? Or at least good is better than perfect. And so we a couple years ago we kind of put a Band-Aid on it. What we did is we said, all right, the current rates, if people are going to be using it as a cash equivalent, are too high. Let's account for. We weren't previously accounting for the fact that when you book an award, you don't earn miles on those flights. So we just subtracted 7% from our RV values to come up with new numbers that felt better, as far like they were closer to what we could accept as cash equivalents. So now the other thing that happened, so the original RVs were based on almost entirely just on logic as opposed to observing the world, at least when it came to airline miles. So what we did is we said, oh, look, with airline miles, you can book round trip economy awards within the US for 25,000 miles. Because that was the standard in almost all the programs.
For years and years, for a long.
Yeah.
And that's how they would advertise the cards on the plane, right? They'd tell you that you get enough miles for 2 round trips in the United States with 50,000 mile offer or something like that, right? So, I mean, that was the standard for a long time.
Exactly. And even foreign programs often did that, where using those foreign miles to book a flight in the United States was often that same price. So we said, okay, well, we've read elsewhere that most awards are domestic economy awards. And so let's put these two things together, look up the average cost of US domestic round trip awards, basically divide by 25,000. And that's a reasonable redemption value, whatever you get by doing that. And so, that calculation back when came up with 1.4 cents per mile. When we adjusted it down by 7%, it was 1.3. But then over time, what happened was airlines dropped that 25,000 mile thing. Delta did it first. They did away with award charts and started tying their flights more and more over time to the cash price. Their award prices are closely tied, although it's not a formula. So you can't figure out one from the other, but they're closely tied to cash prices. And then United did the same, and American, even though American still has award charts, they have these web special awards, and they price just like Delta and United. They price flights with web special awards however they want. So web special awards could be a cheap price, it could be a high price. It's all over the map. And the point is, this whole notion of 25,000 round trip is gone. And so using that as a basis for our RVs just makes no sense anymore.
No, and it's been that way for a little bit. We kind of been talking about it and hemming and hawing about it because it became a sliding scale after a while. Once Delta did away with their award charts, really, and then then United and American weren't far behind. That really, for a while now, has made it questionable and difficult. And it's hard because what do you do to determine what the points are worth, right? And obviously, this week Greg did some work towards that. But I mean, truthfully, even if you could physically look up every flight from every airport, both cash and award price, and somehow average that all out, it really wouldn't be useful information for most people, because most people are going to be living in a large major market, one of the markets that Greg did this week, but then you might not be. And maybe you're flying to some small market, or you're flying internationally, you're flying here or there.
Yeah.
It's going to vary so much from person to person. And the key point is that, we're trying to nail down an amount that is reasonable to expect. And for you to say, okay, if I'm getting less than this, maybe I shouldn't be redeeming miles. And if I'm getting this much or more, then okay, I'm getting a good deal, and that's fine. And it's still a murky number. No matter what, it's going to be hard because there's so much potential variance, although you found less variance than I expected in some of your searches.
Yeah, I mean, the airlines have for, I was going to say for better or worse, but
Mostly
largely for worse, I think, have significantly, as I said before, tied the award price now to the cash price. Actually, you could argue it's for the better, because as cash prices go down, so do the award prices, and so people
true.
aren't getting
gouged quite
as gouged as they used to get when things were when cash prices were low.
Right.
So anyway, I don't think we should go into the full details of what I did, but rather let's just suffice to say, I came up with a methodology to estimate the how much real world award prices for economy flights within the U.S. How much value you get using your miles for economy within the U.S. Right, and the results were. So remember, before we had 1.3 as the reasonable redemption value. This methodology of looking at real world data brought delta down to 1.2. That wasn't too shocking. I mean, for a while, a lot of people thought, well, Delta should be lower than the other airlines. They're known to have higher award prices, so this was a reasonable finding. And the Delta happened to be the first one I did. But then I did United and American Airlines, and United came in at 1.1 cent per mile. So that's a pretty significant drop from the 1.3.
Right.
And American came in at 1.0.
1.0, 1 cent per mile.
Yeah.
Now, that, first of all, obviously seems a bit surprising, because you wouldn't expect American miles to be worth that much less than Delta miles. I mean, less than Delta miles at all would probably come across as a surprise to many listeners who are used to redeeming a lot of award tickets. But then furthermore, I think it begs the question, and we'll get into this in a second, I'm sure, does this make any sense? Because anyone who knows much about award charts knows that there are tons of options to get way more than 1 cent per mile in value. You know, when I look at a welcome bonus on an American Airlines credit card of like 60,000 miles, I always think of that in terms of that's enough miles for one-way business class to Asia or one-way business class to Europe or whatever. And, you know, those types of international business class tickets are often in the thousands of dollars. So to look at that and say, well, that 60,000 miles is only worth $600, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. So there's two big problems, and we could debate how I did the analysis and, you know, which particular numbers I collected, but I don't think the results, like if we change it up, are going to be that different. And it results in
Likely
two
not.
problems. So one problem is Delta coming out ahead of American and United, when we know that those kind of flights that you're talking about, international business class, are way cheaper to book with American, cheaper to book with United, not as cheap as with American, but way cheaper than Delta, and Delta's the most expensive for those. So we know if that's how you're going to use your miles, it would be a disaster to look at frequent milers numbers and say, oh, Delta's better, so I'm going to collect those miles.
I think that's the scariest part right there, what you just said, and that's the part of the follow-up post you wrote that stood out to me the most, was the thought of a person that is not terribly familiar with this stuff coming to our blog and looking at it and saying, oh, wow, Delta miles are worth the most, so I should get a Delta credit card and spend on the Delta credit card because those miles are worth more than everybody else's.
Right. And so that's obviously a big problem. The other problem is not so much the relative values of these three, but they're all well, with maybe the exception of Delta, just too low if we're going to be using them as cash equivalents. Like, I do not believe that American miles are only worth a penny each. Again, using this business class example, we get so much more value, and
the truth is, I would buy them at 1 cent each. Like, I mean, maybe I would. I don't know. You know, if you're a manufacturer spender, maybe not. But generally speaking, if I wanted to take a trip to Asia, $600 is probably reasonable for an economy class ticket. So darn right, I would buy them at 1 cent each to fly business class if they were only 1 cent each. You know,
right. I mean, that would be like the deal of the year if they were just selling them for a penny each. That's too low as a cash equivalent. And what it's going to do, it's also going to encourage people to pick, for example, cash back instead of airline miles when, so for example, if you're looking at a 65,000 point American Airlines sign up bonus versus a $650 cash sign up bonus, and you're planning a trip to Asia, like you were talking about, with the American Airlines one, you've got a business class ticket to get there. You don't have enough to get back, but the point is you're not even anywhere close with the cash money. So it depends what you want to do with it, but you're going to be making bad decisions because we have it too low. So it's a problem.
And compounding on that was a point that a reader made in a comment that stuck out at me that said that they'd given up completely on miles and they were focusing on cash back because they said it's useful to know now that they've looked at your numbers and seen what miles are worth. They said it's useful to know that Chase Ultimate Rewards are now worth no more than 1.3 cents each, and the pay yourself back is the best value redemption. That's what they got out of you running these numbers for the airline miles. And clearly, I hope for most people listening, clearly for you and I, that is not true. Now, the pay yourself back is good. And I think a lot of people should think about the 1.5 cents pay yourself back, but it is definitely far from clear to me that that is the best possible option. It's not the best possible option in all scenarios. Now, for some people, it might be. I mean, cash back is good. I think there's arguments to be made for that and all that jazz. But there are so many opportunities to do much better than that with Ultimate Rewards points. Like,
we're
talking about floor values here where you can reasonably expect to redeem, and it's tricky because we're talking about these things like business class to Asia, or we could talk first class redemptions and blah blah blah. And for some people listening, they're like, oh yeah, of course, that's how I use my miles. But I would say that for more people listening than those people imagine, that's not how they use their miles. I mean, the bottom line is that most people do redeem for domestic economy class. They don't advertise the American Airlines credit card on an American Airlines flight as giving you enough miles for business class to Asia because they know that most people aren't going to use them that way. That's not going to draw in the average consumer. Average consumer is going to use them on domestic economy. So that's why they always say, oh, 2 round trip, economy class tickets or whatever. So we have to recognize that most people will redeem their miles domestically, but at the same time, not wickedly undervalue these welcome bonuses in ways that just aren't realistic either. So it's a catch-22. It's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, in an ideal world, we would come up with a range of values, like say these miles are worth from this to this for this type of purpose, for like economy US flights. It's worth from this to this for this type of thing. And that would be great, but it's not, for one, it's not something that would be easy to put together. But for two, secondly, we need, for our blog, we need point estimates. And because we have them in our credit card displays, we have them in different posts. We use them to show unbiased information. Like so, for example, we sort credit card offers from best to worst based on our estimate of the first year value, which includes our valuation of the airline miles, if it's an airline card. And so we need a point estimate. Whatever we do is not going to be perfect. There's no right answer to this. Right.
Right.
The best we could do is get better than where we are right now.
And we don't want to just make it up. We don't want to just pull a number out of the sky. Like, I mean, there are blogs that do that. They're just kind of
most do. Yeah.
Right. They're just like, oh, this is about what they're worth, I think. They don't have any basis for it. You won't. I think you won't see this level of thought explained on most blogs in terms of how they valued the points.
Right. I mean, in fact,
spend that much time thinking about it.
Right. In fact, until I did this analysis, I think if you ask most bloggers, which miles should I use for my domestic economy flight, I don't think Delta would be the first thing that they think of. Not that that's the end all. I said that, there's ways you could argue about the methodology, but the point is everybody assumed Delta miles are worth less. it's not necessarily the
true.
case.
Interesting also, by the way, since we're talking about domestic economy and the value of miles, and you found the Delta were the best out of the three major legacy carriers at 1.2 cents. When I looked at that, I said to myself, all right, so should the vast majority of our listeners who primarily redeem miles and points for domestic economy class be collecting only JetBlue and Southwest points? Because
I know, I thought about that.
like,
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to the recommendation to use transferable points, because you could, at least from Chase, you could transfer to Southwest, and a number of programs you could transfer to JetBlue, and that way, when those programs are the best for you, yeah, you'll do it. But yeah, I think it does say to me more often, if you could get the same number of miles in those programs as you can in Delta or United or American, and that's your main use is to fly domestically, I bet you would do better, probably significantly better with those programs.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's also interesting because the methodology, while I think was very good, as you've said a few times, it's far from perfect because it's very difficult to determine these point values. When you look at the fact that, for example, Greg found that Delta miles were worth the most, but that's worth the most in comparison to Delta's prices, which, to be fair, I mean, you may want to pay the Delta price for the Delta product, but if you're the type of person who's just looking to find the best value ticket from your airport to where you're going, you're not necessarily going to be considering Delta if they're the most expensive. And you found that Delta did, on average, have the most expensive prices, comparatively. So while their miles were worth more towards their cash price, they weren't necessarily worth more compared to the cheapest option from each airport pair.
That's right. That's right. In fact, to make things like kind of really crazy, while American had the lowest point value compared to its own prices, the average award cost across these same data points, American, United, Delta, American charged the least on average. That's because I was comparing to American's cash prices, which were also the least than the other two. And so, from that point of view, having American miles is better because you'll get more trips out of it. So,
and truthfully, I feel like that is probably likely to be a better fit for the average consumer. I mean, I think that there are some people who surely would, prefer Delta over the other options. But at the same time, if they're looking at a new card bonus of, say, 70,000 points, and they can get 5 flights versus getting 8 flights with the same number of American Airlines miles, I think the average consumer would probably want the 8 flights. And I just made those numbers up. I didn't actually do the math. But probably most people would like to take more trips on their miles, right?
Yeah. Well, it's complicated. And as an aside, of course, transferable points again, Chase Ultimate Rewards, for example, you could, if you have the Sapphire Reserve, you could book the flights at 1.5 cents value. So it would take way less Chase points to book those American flights than American miles to book those same flights. The other thing to point out, and I didn't write this up, but I noticed as I was collecting the data, the American Airlines flights were the least convenient. So I had some criteria, like I had this imaginary person flying to another city and, a bunch of cities. And the idea was they're trying to make it to a late dinner. And very often with American, I either had to show up later than I wanted to, or even more often, I didn't want to get to the airport too early. The idea is this person doesn't want to have to get up at 3 a.m. to make a 6 a.m. flight. And, but I found myself with American saying, all right, in these cases, I need to do the 5:30 a.m. flight because it's saving so much money over this other one, or there's just nothing else, no other good ones. I don't know why that was, but that's what I saw a number of times with American.
Yeah,
so
it's fascinating.
It's not the same. It's not the same product, is what you're ending up with.
Well, true. Yeah, that is a good point, that it isn't. And when I get lost in all this, I also kind of think back to a comment I made on Twitter a few weeks ago when somebody complained about Delta miles not being valuable, and I can't remember exactly what they said. Maybe they were talking about international business class or something. And I said, well, you can't you can't need a Phillips head screwdriver or a flathead screwdriver and complain that your Phillips head screwdriver is a bad tool because it won't turn the flathead screw. It's not a bad tool. It's just not the right tool for the job. If your job is, international business class redemptions, I think we'll find that Delta miles are not typically your best choice. For domestic economy. They certainly may be, but again, they may not be. Chase points at 1.5 cents each certainly look to be the best possible option for booking domestic flights. And now when I think when you consider the fact that you'll also earn miles on those flights, I feel like the Sapphire Reserve at 1.5 cents each.
Really good point.
Starting to look a lot better than collecting airline miles. And I don't think that that's a big surprise to most people who listen to this. I think most people probably are familiar with the fact that the welcome bonus is what's worth going after on those airline cards. It's not worth spending at 1 mile per dollar. And we're definitely not going to find a surprise that, oh, wow, we should spend at 1 mile per dollar. That was clearly not going to happen. So I don't think we expected that. I just don't think that we expected to be quite so low in how they
Right. Now, on the plus side, as far as these programs go with booking economy flights, is there were ranges, right? So what I showed was the median. American values went up to 1.6. There were I saw at least one flight that had a 1.6 cents per mile value. So that would be an example where it would do a little bit better than Chase points. And Delta went up to 1.7. So that's an example where, for example, if you had an Amex membership rewards points and you saw an award like that on Delta, you might actually want to transfer your points and book it that way.
Right. So there are times when it might be the right tool for the job, but a lot of times I'm thinking that your domestic airline miles programs, it's funny because, we recently had said that conventional wisdom has long been that if you want to book a flight on, say, American Airlines, you don't want American Airlines miles, or if you want to book a flight on Delta, you don't want Delta miles. But then we found that kind of got turned on its head, right? Because everybody's got this variable pricing, and so we just a few weeks ago on the show talked about how it's not necessarily true anymore. With a lot of programs, you do want their own miles to fly in them, and now I feel like my perspective is changing yet again on that. Like the best use of airline miles in general, I feel like, is probably not flying on those airlines after all, except maybe Delta. Delta domestic economy is, I think, probably going to be the best use of Delta miles, although we'll see, because I think your idea for doing a blend, for doing a hybrid, is a really interesting one. I don't know if it's the perfect, it's definitely not the perfect solution, because there is no perfect solution. Best solution out of the, options that we have at this point. But I think that's interesting. So you think that has promise. What do you expect to find? And can you explain, maybe for those who didn't read the post yet, what the blended approach is theoretically going to be?
So the idea is to try to estimate the value of these miles for booking international business class awards. So flying to Europe, flying to Asia, flying to Australia, for example, just to name 3 examples. And so we would estimate them across the different programs to say, all right, it tends to be on average worth this much for international business class. And I expect those numbers on all 3 programs to be significantly higher than the economy domestic US flights came out to be. But I also expect that, that Delta's, even though Delta will likely have a higher value for business class, that it'll be much lower than what American and United end up with is my expectation, but we'll see. But so the idea is we come up with that number. We still have the domestic number, and we basically combine the 2 of them in a way, basically saying, all right, if someone spends, for example, 3/4 of their miles for domestic US and 25% for international business class, then what is the new average? And that would be the blended average. And so I'm kind of waiting to actually collect the data to say, what is that number? Is it 75%? Is it 80? Is it 60? And the reason I'm doing that is because, as we've talked about here, there is no right answer to this, what the right percentage should be. But there is like a sniff test. There's like when you get a number, like we're looking at the American Airlines number of 1.0 and saying that's wrong. We know that's wrong.
And to be clear, it's not wrong because we feel like, we want our credit card values to be higher. That's not it. We look at it and we say it's just not realistic.
It's not realistic, and as we discussed earlier, people will be making bad decisions based on it.
Exactly.
So we need a number that feels right. That we could stand by. That if people are making decisions based on it, we don't feel bad about that.
Right.
And what that is, we'll have to wait and see. So that's the idea, and I think it actually makes logical sense too, because if you think about most people spending most of their miles on domestic economy, even if they only do one big international trip every like 3 years, because international business class trips cost more miles than those domestic economy, that still might end up being, for example, 25% of the miles that they've spent.
True.
So that's how I'm thinking of it, and I think I don't know. We'll see.
So it's interesting because I think we got a few comments from readers who said that they can accept the fact that the majority of miles redeemed are for domestic economy flights, but they assumed that the majority of our readers probably are not redeeming for domestic economy. Do you think that's true? Do you think that there's a large percentage of readers and listeners who are using for those international premium cabins? Do you think that makes up a more significant portion? Is that something that should be a bigger consideration?
So my bet is, if you're looking at how many of our readers, know that stuff and sort of cherry pick the best international awards, if you're looking in comparison to other sites that don't talk about this, then obviously we have a much bigger percentage than other sites. But I would still bet you that the vast majority, like 80%, 90% of our readers, they kind of live vicariously, us writing about this stuff, that it's not something they do. And I know people who are steeped in it, that's what and so you talk to other people who do this kind of stuff, so it feels like everybody's doing it. That's just not true.
No, it's not. And the truth is, I actually think it doesn't even matter, because I look at it and I say, okay, the goal here is to create a value where we're like, okay, this is how much you can reasonably expect to get. This is how much this is probably worth. And if you spend some time reading here and studying this stuff, you can reasonably expect to get far more. And I think that having a lot of space on the top end is not really a problem, because at the end of the day, I don't think you probably need to spend a lot of time, with the pencil and paper trying to determine, okay, so should I get United miles or American Airlines miles? Because I'm going to get, 2.16 cents per mile on the one and 2.32 on the other, and blah, blah, blah. Like that kind of comparison just becomes academic at that point. Either way, you're doing really well. So I'm not going to judge harshly if you booked something that was a few more miles with one program over the other when you're booking an international business class or first class trip, where you're surely getting terrific outsized value almost no matter what, unless you're redeeming Delta miles, almost no matter what. So yeah. I don't think that is as important as creating a value where, like you said, people aren't making a bad decision. They aren't saying, okay, well, I'd like to take a trip to Asia. Which credit card bonus should I get? Oh, this American Airlines miles bonus is only worth $600, but this cash back bonus is worth $650. Or the venture card, their bonus is $600 too. So I should get the venture card instead of the American Airlines card. And it's like, I mean, come on, like if you want to sign up for the venture card, great, fine, use our link. But, I don't want to talk you into it because we had a value for American Airlines miles. It doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And worse, you sign up for the Delta card with that goal in mind.
Right.
And you could have done so much better with the American Airlines card.
And that's just one
United
example.
Card, the Alaska card.
Yeah, exactly. All over the world, we got different examples like this. So yeah, it's a tough.
Right. Now, at the same time, one of the things that would be really great if we go forward with this solution, and I'm saying if because I'm waiting to see what feedback we get from the post about it, and so we might change our mind. So we don't know. We're doing the show before the post aired, but if we do compile these business class numbers, we'll publish those too. It's just they won't be part of our credit card displays, but we'll publish those numbers. And the nice thing about that is people who know, people who are the readers that are advanced and know this stuff, they'll know that, well, we're planning on using it for business class international flights. So I'm going to use frequent milers business class numbers, not the blended number.
Right.
Great.
And then you can look at that and say, okay, well, this is about reasonable for these miles. Okay, great. I'm getting a good deal on this flight. That's okay. I can go ahead and book it. Now, I mean, you still, I think, are going to want to use award booking tools like whether it's Juicy Miles or SeatSpy or Award Hacker or whatever it is out there that you use to compare stuff and figure out what your best deal is in terms of the number of miles. But it will at least give you that sort of rubric to say, okay, this is something I shouldn't even be considering. Or at least something where you can say, okay, well, maybe I ought to pay cash if that's an option for you in that situation where you're like, oh, should I pay cash or should I, use my miles? And I think that there's a lot of people out there, when we go back to the fact that a lot more people redeem their miles for domestic economy class than the small subset of us that don't redeem many miles that way might believe. I think that a lot of people just like to keep cash in their pocket. And so they look at it and say, okay, well, I'm going to use miles one way or another. So what's my best mile deal? And
sure.
And so, we want to have a value that makes sense for that large portion of people.
Right.
All right. So
cool.
Brings us to the end of this week's main event, right?
That's right. So what do we have next? The
post roast
time. All right. Do you have anything for me?
I was gonna delay a little time here and say, should I be nervous? No, I don't have a roast for you this week. You wrote really? These great posts about the value of airline miles. You wrote this.
I wrote that American Airlines miles were worth 1 cent each, and you're not going to roast me.
Well, I mean, I just had the chance to roast you. So I don't want to drag that out. I don't want to beat a dead horse here. We're done.
All right. All right. Wait, no.
You wrote a good post, though. I will say that if you haven't, we're not talking about it here, but if you haven't read the post that Greg wrote about the things you ought to know about Amex credit cards, you should. And I hoped to find something in there I could roast, and I really had a hard time finding what it was that I could roast in there because it was all good.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was really cool. That it came all out of like one question from a reader. Like I actually thought about it, bringing that question onto the show. Because the reader actually started his email saying, I've got another question for you for question of the week. But as I started thinking about how I'd answer it, I realized, oh my God, it's amazing how many things about American Express you need to know in order to come to an answer to that question. And it's kind of neat how that fell out.
You really do. And I think that it's knowledge that those who know might take for granted. I know that, when I started reading it, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I know these things. And then I thought to myself as I was reading through it, yeah, but who does? Like, apart from somebody who does this every day for a living, like, who would know all of those things? There's a lot to know about it in terms of the strategy and figuring out which card to get rid of in that case, because the question in this case was a reader saying they got denied for an Amex card because they had too many credit cards, so they had to decide which one to drop, and we're trying to figure out which one, but there's a lot of ins and outs in determining which one you would want to drop in that case.
There's a lot there.
Yeah. So read that post. If you haven't read it, this is a reverse roast. This is the opposite of a roast. Where I'm going to tell you,
that's kind of nice. I'm not going to do the same for you, I'm afraid.
Shoot. All right.
You wrote the complete guide to IHG Rewards program.
I sure did.
And in that post, you wrote, and I quote, "Not even top tier elites get free breakfast or lounge access." Right? But there's actually 3 buts here.
Okay.
But number 1.
All right.
Further down in the post, you're listing the Intercontinental Ambassador benefits. And among those are 1 complimentary full breakfast per day, ... valid in mainland China only.
and is an Intercontinental Ambassador really an IHG Elite member? I mean, okay, I guess they consider it an elite status. And I put it in there under elite status because that's kind of what it is. But it's like a membership program. It's like a club you join, right?
It
You
is,
pay
but
$200 for it.
the only reason the reason I could get away with roasting you about
Okay.
this is because you had it listed
You're
under elite levels.
You're right. I did.
All right.
I did.
Further
Maybe I
down,
shouldn't have.
same section,
We're
a
not
little
done.
bit further down, Royal Ambassador does get intercontinental or Regent Club lounge access. Royal Ambassador is that invite only program, so they do get club lounge access. If there is no club or they can't get in for some reason, then they get full breakfast. So they get breakfast too, and not just in mainland China, apparently.
Right there in the post, right in front of me.
Yeah, not in the post though. Digging into terms and conditions, I found Six Senses hotels, resorts, and spas. Do you know them?
I mean, not well, but I not as well as I'd like to. If there's something to be said here,
I gather
I'm on the edge of my seat here.
I don't know much about them, but they seem to be sort of a luxury.
Seems that way.
Spa, like healthy living-ish,
right,
Ravel-ish type of place.
Exactly. Right? That's what came to my mind. It's that kind of a place. Yeah.
Right. So that's what it looks like from their website. I've never stayed at one. There's about 20, I think, around the world. And they were bought by IHG, and they're very slowly integrating with the program. So here's what it says in the terms and conditions. Six Senses Hotels, Resorts, Spa will progressively be integrating into the IHG Rewards program, and at that time, the following benefits will apply for Intercontinental Ambassador, Royal Ambassador, and Kimpton Inner Circle members at participating Six Senses hotels. So, all right, so the caveats are
they hired somebody from Choice Privileges, didn't they?
The caveats are of the 26 Senses hotels, it has to be one that has been integrated, and it has to be one that's participating. But if it's both of those, then all of those invite-only ones qualify for these benefits, but so does Intercontinental Ambassador, which is the one that you could buy into very easily. Right. Here's what you get. You get complimentary breakfast for 2 in the main restaurant per day. Mm-hmm. Signature amenity of either 50-minute Six Senses spa massage for 2, or local experience once per stay. Mm-hmm. Complimentary 1 category room upgrade. Extended checkout of 4 p.m. subject to availability, but it's guaranteed for the invite-only elites. Early checkout, I think they meant check-in, but it says early checkout. I'm gonna
early
decide
checkout.
Early check-in of 10 a.m. subject to availability. And again, it's guaranteed for like Royal Ambassador and Kimpton Inner Circle. And then free internet, which
I'm waiting for the part where you're going to tell me that it's not any good on award days.
And then a wellness platter, welcome amenity on day of arrival. It didn't say anything about award stays, so I'm thinking that you could probably argue your way into it when they tell you no.
Maybe because IHG benefits don't apply on award stays, right? Technically, there aren't very many elite benefits, but
Ambassador, I don't think.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I don't think that's true of Ambassador benefits. So this is kind of a gray area. Right. We know that some ambassador benefits do apply. This didn't say one way or another. So interesting question. Anyway, there is breakfast going on
so
there.
There's breakfast.
There's also some other, quite a few other.
At integrated participating Six Senses resorts, there's breakfast.
Right. So at that one hotel, maybe if that exists, I don't know. But I have to say, I'm kind of intrigued because, this brought me to look at the website. They look amazing. If we could get a good deal with points or a cash-based stay, and, I could see it being worth buying into the ambassador program if you're going to be staying at one of these anyway, and if it's participating, et cetera, et cetera.
Here's the question that I assume you probably aren't going to know the answer to yet. Are any of the Six Senses places bookable with points yet?
I don't know the answer.
I don't know either, but I don't think they are, but I could be wrong. I definitely didn't double check that. So now I'm going to have to go back and double check that and see. But the Six Senses properties and the Mr. and Mrs. Smith properties are things that are slowly getting integrated. And I don't think that COVID has helped speed that up any. So I know I was excited at the time when those things were kind of announced, and then they kind of, fell by the wayside because I just haven't been thinking about that kind of travel in a while. But as we do, as things pick back up, then certainly I will be intrigued with that too, because certainly it would be worth spending $200 for breakfast if you get free breakfast for two each day, especially on an awards day.
Yeah, and then you still have ambassador status for the whole year. So if you have other stays, and plus you get the free
the massage
weekend night and
yeah. So all right, okay. So I'll take that roasting there, that I need to dig through the Six Senses terms and conditions and get that added to the complete guide, because that needs to be in there. Now,
there you go.
The other thing that needs to be in there, if somebody knows more than I do, is what more can you tell me about how to get targeted to be Kimpton Inner Circle or Royal Ambassador? Because I mean, I get that it requires a lot of time at these hotels, but I'd love to hear some data points as to how much time you spent at these hotels in order to trigger those super secret invite only statuses. So, but that aside, okay, so that brings us then, I think, to the question of the week.
Yes.
Okay.
It's time.
I'm excited about this week's question of the week, because this week's question of the week comes from me.
Oh,
and so my question of the week for you, Greg, is two-part. First, have you switched to T-Mobile yet? And if not, why not?
You know the answer to both of those questions.
I know. I definitely, I think I know the answer to one, but I definitely don't know the why not part.
I have not switched to T-Mobile yet. Unfortunately, I got a new phone not all that long ago, and so the incentive to switch, where they give you like a discount off a new phone, is not tempting to me. I mean, I guess I could get one and sell it or whatever, but I think honestly that's probably the main hang up, because for a while I resisted, because right now I'm personally on Google Fi, and I love that back in the days when I traveled internationally.
Right. It made sense at that point.
Yeah. But T-Mobile's not that much worse I mean, you still get international data very slow, but then you could pay only $5 a day to get high speed when you're traveling. Yeah. So it's not a bad at all, I think, compromise. So really there's not necessarily a good reason for me not to switch, but I haven't done it.
But you haven't done it.
And I am very jealous every time you post about all these free lines you're getting.
They just keep throwing them away. It's like it's crazy. I enjoy the fact that we have it now, also because of the fact that if and when we do travel internationally again, it's just convenient having phones that work when you get there. And that's the nice thing with Google Fi. Also, of course, that just works when you land, and you turn it on, you wait a couple minutes, and then boom, you're on and you're going. I mean, that's terrific. Yep. So like you said, the problem with T-Mobile internationally is that the speeds are slow, except in Mexico and Canada. You get 5G in Mexico and Canada, or 4G LTE, whatever it is, depending where you are in Mexico and Canada. So you do get good speeds there, but if you go to Europe or Asia or whatever else, you get a really slow speed. But they keep throwing these free lines at us, and so it's like it's hard to say no. I wrote this week about the latest one, and so they gave away 4 free lines last year, and that's 1 so far this year. And I'm not sure I read, part of the reason I asked this, of course, was because I wrote the post this week about the fact that they're giving a free line. If you have 2 paid lines or more on T-Mobile, then you can get a free line right now. And depending on your plan, you may end up having to pay taxes on that free line every month, like $5 a month or something. But with a number of plans also, my plan included, both my old plan and my new plan, because I switched, it doesn't cost anything at all. It's literally no additional fee on my bill. I just got a free line, and it gets the same plan as the rest of your lines. So in my case now, I'm on Magenta Max, which is the top end plan that T-Mobile offers, totally unlimited, no throttle on the data, 40 gigs of hotspot per line, which is just like way more than you get with anybody else for hotspot. and the free lines get that too without having to pay for it. So,
Yeah.
and I read that this is only going to be available until Monday. I don't know if that's true, but I wanted to bring it up for people who are on T-Mobile who aren't familiar with it, because you can add a free line, and then there's a number of phones that you get for free when you add a line, including a free line. So you pick up a phone and sell it, give it to somebody, donate it, whatever else you want to do with it. If you want to get one of those things, I got a phone for a family member, cheap because I added a new line. So I think it's worth doing if you're on T-Mobile. There's a lot of different things you could do with that free line in terms of being able to take advantage of more T-Mobile Tuesdays deals and being able to take advantage of T-Mobile money to deposit money and earn good interest and blah, blah. There's a lot of reasons. And so I'm asking myself, why isn't Greg on T-Mobile yet? Why isn't he on
Now,
T-Mobile?
I would have to have 2 lines, right, on T-Mobile in order to qualify for a free line.
You do. You need 2 paid lines in order to get the free line.
So it wouldn't be just me porting over, but one of my family members who are on AT&T, and there are places we go where AT&T has coverage and the other networks. Yeah. At least T-Mobile doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly a concern. Yeah. So maybe that's a valid reason. It's a valid reason. Although
it's tough. I hate.
Yeah.
I hate sitting on the sidelines on that deal. That's such a smoking deal.
Yeah. And they keep doing it. That's the crazy thing. I can't believe that they keep. You asked me part of the reason I brought this up was because Greg asked me recently. He said, do you think they'll continue to do these free lines? Should I switch and get a T-Mobile account? And I said, I don't know. I mean, they did 4 of them last year. Who knows? Maybe they will. And then bam, like a couple weeks later here, out with another free line. And I keep shaking my head. I have 3 paid lines now and 4 free lines. And from what I've read, there are other people that have even more free lines. I think you can have up to 8 lines on a regular plan, but then it's possible to get authorized for up to 12 lines. And
wow,
there may even be a possibility for 15 from what I read. But I just saw a data point from somebody, I think, commented on our post that said that they were told they were at the max with 8, but the rep was able to switch their account around and put them on the 9 to 12, so they could have up to 12 lines now. And
this is always paying for just 2 lines?
You have to have at least 2 paid lines. And in my case, I have 3 paid lines because I didn't know any better back in the day and paid for 3 lines. And
why didn't you drop one of the 3 when you got a free one?
That's how they get you. That's how they get you. When you add the free line, you can't drop any of your paid lines or any of your lines for 12 months. Otherwise, so if I tried to drop one of my paid lines now, then the free line would no longer be free. The way they do it is they give you.
So they keep offering this promo every few months because they're afraid you're gonna get to your 12-month point and start dropping lines.
Exactly. And so now it's just reset this week. I got to wait another 12 months before I could consider dropping one of those paid lines and keeping my various free lines. But at this point, 3 paid and 4 free is pretty good. And I've read about people who have 6 or 7 free lines. So, that's nuts to me. I can't believe that continues going on. You keep it as long as you keep your plan. Now, if you switch your plan at some point in the future, there's the possibility that you won't be able to keep those free lines. I was able to switch and keep my free line. So it depends on your situation and which plans you're switching from and to. And you can't add the free line if you're on like the military plan or the first responder plan or the 55 plus plan. So there's some restrictions and stuff. You can read it in the post. Link will be in the description, but I think it's a good deal for people who are.
So you have all these free lines. They each have all this like hotspot data that they can provide. Are you now using it as your primary internet, or are you still for cable or whatever you
I also have T-Mobile home internet, but the coverage isn't always great. And if I want to work outside or wherever else, it's kind of a pain to bring it outside, blah, blah, blah. So I use my mobile hotspot very frequently on my phones, quite a bit, in fact. And in fact, the mobile hotspot is faster because 5G here where I live in the countryside in the middle of nowhere, I'm getting around 70 megs down and around 35 or 40 up. And the home internet is much, much less than that. It's 4G, so it's much less than that. So you could conceivably think about getting rid of it. Of course, I don't know. I like to stream things and whatnot, so I don't want to run up against the cap. But I certainly, when I switched plans from my old plan to this one. My old plan had up to 50 gigabytes of data on each line before it would get throttled. And so when I switched to this new one, it's got unlimited regular data on your phone, but up to 40 gigs of hotspot data. And so I thought, well, maybe I'm taking a little bit of a downgrade, but it turned out it was a little cheaper. And I said, well, I could add another line in the future and still pay a little bit less than I had been. And maybe they'll offer a free line and I won't even have to worry about paying for that extra line.
Yeah, never
I'll pick up even more. And sure enough, here we are just a few weeks later and they added that. So that's nice. The other thing that's nice is because there's no cap at all on the data on the phone, and they do full 4K streaming and all the rest of that. Now, when I have to upload something that's very data heavy, I'm just moving it over my phone first and then uploading it from my phone. So for example, this podcast, when I upload it to YouTube, this file is like 8 or 9 gigabytes when I'm processing it. And so I'm just uploading it directly from my phone. I just plug my phone into the computer, drop the file.
That's hilarious.
Upload it from the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't count against your cap.
Doesn't count against my cap from the phone. And, it flies by because it's going at, 70 megs. So it's, so anyway, I'm a fan at this point. I'm a fan.
Wow. I feel like you need to just get a keyboard, a Bluetooth keyboard, and a screen that attaches to your phone, and just use that as your PC.
That could be it. I do have a Bluetooth keyboard actually that I used to use with a phone years ago when it was much slower and more frustrating. Now with how fast phones have gotten, that's not as crazy as it sounds.
Right. It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
All right.
That, my friends, brings us to the end for this week. So if you've been enjoying what we've been talking about and you'd like to get these posts as soon as they come hot off the presses, you want to go to frequentmiler.com/subscribe. Again, that's frequentmiler.com/subscribe to get on our email list. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and join our Facebook group. If you're watching this or if you're listening to this in podcast form, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, leave us a comment. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit subscribe, ding the notification bell so you find out as soon as we publish new videos each week. Thank you very much for being out there with us. We will see you guys again next week.
And go catch up on the other 89 episodes if you haven't listened to them all.
That's right. You got some work. You got some yard work to do this weekend, guys.
A lot of yard work.
A lot of yard work.
All right. Bye, everybody.